Welcome to Share Talk, the only podcast where investors come first.
Hello and welcome to Share Talk. I'm Charlie Gibson. Now, everybody knows it's common sense, isn't it, that you don't want to share your bed with a Cobra. That's not too difficult to grasp. But what's good for a person is not necessarily also true of your pension fund. And in this case, the company I'm talking about is Cobra Resources, and its shares, well, they've more than doubled so far this year. So quite a nice little earner. You could have bought the shares for a penny in January, and they're currently trading at 2.6, so up, 2.6 times. And joining me now is the MD of the company, Craig Moulton, all the way from sunny Australia. Craig, very good afternoon to you, I suppose I should say. Good morning to us, obviously. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. But for those listeners who aren't intimately familiar immediately with Cobra, could you give us a bit of background on the company?
Thanks, Charlie. Look, so Cobra is a main market listed exploration development company. Ticker code is COBR. We have projects in South Australia. We've got our flagship Woodner Gold project, which is located about 6 hours out of the capital of South Australia, near the town of Woodner. And then we also have the Prince Alfred Copper project. Woodner project is a orogenic gold project. Already has an existing resource base of 211,000 ounces in 3 deposits. Those deposits are called Baggy Green, Barnes and White Tank. It's in the Central Gawler Gold Province, which is an established fertile gold system, and there are a number of other deposits in that system. Also, the granites, the plutons that form the mineralisation for the gold in our project is the same source as the Olympic Dam, the massive Olympic Dam project owned by BHP, which is about 300 kilometres to the northeast. We believe the mineralisation is likely to be open pittable. It's non-refractory, which makes it easy to process. We have some very high grade intercepts up to 97 grams per tonne, and it's a really large tenement package. So it's approximately 80 kilometres wide by about 50 to 60 kilometres north to south. So a total of about 1,928 square kilometres.
And at the moment, you're at the stage where you're exploring, is that right? You're putting down drill holes, bringing up core, analysing it, send it away for analysis, getting assays back, growing your resources. Just how do you see the company developing, I suppose, these three prospects in the short to medium term?
Look, we're very excited, and you're quite correct. Our drill rig turned up today, so it arrived late this afternoon. So we obviously hope to be up and drilling tomorrow. The drilling contractor is Hagstrom, which we have an equity agreement with to actually keep our drilling costs very low. I just refer.
Can you tell us how low? Or is that
I'm bound by confidentiality not to give you the exact number, but what I can tell you is that it's a fixed price agreement, so it's a per metre drilling cost, and that Hagstrom Drilling are taking 30% of that fixed cost as shares equity. So it's a great benefit for us. It's good to see an industry participant that is actually investing in us and engaged in the project, which is a big vote of confidence. So look, as you said, we're very much focused on developing this project. This initial program is in the Baggy Green area, one of the 3 deposits I mentioned earlier. And we're looking to define the orientation and continuity of the existing mineralisation so that we can continue to grow what I call the brownfields resource base. But we'll also look at then looking at other areas, for example, Clark, which is located about 1.5 kilometres north of Baggy Green, where we already have a number of high gold grade intercepts around about 16 grams per tonne. And we want to start to bring that into the resource base as well. Plus, we're looking at a number of other prospects as well. So we have 22 prospects altogether. And, the board has set itself a target of growing the resource base towards this 1 million ounce target. So we're actively looking at doing that.
Okay, so 1 million ounces. What do you think the timeline might be on that?
Look, that is a little bit hard to say because it does depend on obviously the initial results and how that progresses. It's not likely to happen, within this year. It's a longer prospect than that, obviously, to drill it out, certainly to a level that's sufficient for a feasibility study, is probably something more like, 2 to 3 year timeframe to actually get to that target. But that's certainly what we're focused on.
And then if I was to, and I'll allow you to some latitude in your answer here, but say it were to take you that sort of time span in order to develop your resource, how long do you think it would develop? Then I suppose you're doing preliminary economic assessments, you're doing pre-feasibility studies, you're doing full feasibility studies, but what do you think the timeline to production could be if you hit that sort of million ounce target?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, and obviously we'd look to do as much of that study work in parallel and reduce, the time required to develop the project. It becomes a little bit academic to try and predict that, to be honest with you. I think most mining projects
What about your wildest dreams, your hopes and expectations?
From where we are today, look, I think if we had an operating gold project within 3 to 5 years, I think that would be a very good outcome.
And how would you develop? Are you developing them as a so-called string of pearls type development, sort of one pit, then the next bit, then the next bit, or is it all coming into a sort of centralized processing area? What's your thinking?
Well, certainly at the moment, the current resource base is within 5 kilometres of each other. So there is certainly a centre of mass there with the existing resources. And so it would make a lot of sense to have a central processing facility. But once again, it's hard to answer that without knowing what the development is at some of the other prospects as well. There are a number of options even to looking at mobilising plants so that you build a smaller plant that you can actually then relocate. There's a lot of great work being done on some of these smaller plants on skids, etc. At the moment, we've been talking to one supplier around that sort of concept.
And what about in terms of the area that you're you mentioned the Widner, not quite Piccadilly Circus, I suppose, as far as financial markets are concerned, but we have a conception of South Australia here, which is probably not strictly right, but probably looks something a little bit like your background. But just tell us a little bit about the infrastructure that's there, how easy it is, how easy the whole permitting process it is, access to water, access to electricity, access to tarred roads, all of those good things that you're going to need eventually.
Absolutely. And look, it is a central agricultural hub. So it is a major centre for, and I'll define major in a second, but it is a major centre for the agriculture in that region, which is largely wheat. So we have already an existing rail line that runs through the town of Widner. There is a major highway that runs from Adelaide all the way through, the Central Air Highway. There's a hospital in town, there's a major fuel depot, there's an airstrip. So we are really fortunate that Widner is a very well-developed location. It's already in a major transport route. All of the freight that comes up through Adelaide, a lot of it goes through on that highway. So yeah, look, it's very well developed, and pretty much all of the ingredients that you need to build a major resource project are already there.
And in terms of what you know about the metallurgy already, and you probably know a little bit about the metallurgy, does that look to be fairly simple? Is your thinking sort of carbon and leach, carbon and pulp, something along those lines? Or?
Yeah, look, we're absolutely focused on CIP, CIL type technologies. We haven't done any metallurgical test work ourselves, but our joint venture partner Andromeda had done a series of diamond holes and some preliminary study work. And all of that indicated that it would be very high recoveries, 95% plus, that it was, all non-refractory, so you don't have to look at doing roasting or any other complicated processing, and that all those sort of standard technologies for processing gold deposits would apply. Now, obviously, there's more work that would need to be done as we progress, but certainly that's our thinking at the moment.
It looks quite dry behind you. It may, of course, just be the time of year, but access to water, you talked about the area being an agricultural area. Is there any competition between the mining industry and the farming industry for access to those sorts of resources?
Look, not in the traditional sense, I guess. This farming isn't irrigated per se, so there would be no direct competition. Look, we would still need to look in detail around where we would source water for the mining operation. That would be part of the study process, but we don't see any significant issues at the moment.
Are there enormous aquifers underneath you, as there are over quite a lot of the rest of Australia?
A lot of the ground is granitoid sort of terrain, so typically tertiary weathery profiles. So no, look, you're not talking about massive sedimentary aquifers, not least directly in the part of the project that we have access to. But there's a number of mining operations similar to like our style in South Australia, so don't see it being a significant problem.
Speaking of other mining operations, Rio Tinto have of course distinguished themselves recently by blowing up an Aboriginal site that was heaven knows how many tens of thousands of years old. There is this issue in Australia. Are there any Aboriginal sites that you have to be sensitive towards on your prospects?
So there has been quite a lot of surveying done, certainly in the main areas that we're working at the moment, and there's an agreement in place. The local traditional owners are known as the Bungala people, and so we are currently operating under an agency agreement with Andromeda for that exploration. I've actually spoken to the lawyers for the Bungala people. We've had a very good dialogue so far, and we expect that to continue. There are a couple of sites north of the Baggy Green prospect which are demarcated, so that we won't be entering into those sites at all, and that I don't see that impacting any of our exploration activities at all.
Doesn't coincide with the high grades of your ore body?
No, fortunately it doesn't, which is a good relief.
Now you mentioned the IOCG targets, and you mentioned Olympic Dam there, and of course Olympic Dam, an enormous operation, and many billions to develop, and Cobra is at this stage a relatively small company. Just tell a little bit about your thinking towards those IOCG targets.
So for benefit of maybe investors that aren't familiar with what IOCG stands for, it's iron oxide copper gold. So these typically form very, very large, albeit relatively low grade iron oxide, copper and gold deposits. We have a couple of targets within our prospects that have the potential to be IOCG targets or prospects. And the way that you look at defining these, IOCGs typically occur within the aeromagnetics as discrete magnetic anomalies. So we can see these large Hiltaba granites, which are the granite bodies, and then off the side of those we actually see a small magnetic high. Not only that, you typically see a coincident gravity anomaly as well. And whilst the gravity data that's publicly available at the moment probably isn't sufficient enough to define that in detail, we're certainly very encouraged with what we see there. What the first thing we'll do, as we've done with our orogenic gold projects, is we'll start looking at the geochemistry first. So we'll look at running a series of soil sampling tests over the prospects first. We'll use that to not only look for copper and gold, but we'll also look for the pathfinder elements that give us an indication of where that mineralization is actually located in the basement, and we'll use that geochemical sampling to target the drilling program, which we'll follow up in due course.
Funding always an issue for junior mining companies. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you're funded at the moment, how much cash you've got, how quickly you're burning through it, how long you expect the cash to last within the context of all the exploration and drilling programs you've got going on at the moment, and where you're funded through until, and whether and when you might need to come back to the market for additional finance?
Thank you. So we've been very fortunate. We've obviously received a lot of support from our investors over the last 9 months. We did our initial raise in January, which was an RTO in effect. And then we placed our headroom in March, which was 20%. And we've recently just in the process of finalising a convertible loan note and a prospectus. So look, all in all, we have somewhere in the vicinity of 1.6, 1.7 million pounds available to us. We certainly have some significant exploration programs planned for the rest of this year. In terms of where we see that taking us to, look, we expect to be well funded until late into next year, if not further, based on that level of activity. So, I think we're fortunate. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We intend to be very active, but we're also, well funded at the moment.
Lots of prospects for lots of news flow. Could you just tell us what investors might expect in terms of news flow over the next, say, 3 to 12 months?
Absolutely. We have 3 exploration programs that we've announced to the market so far. Obviously, we're planning on further programs next year as well, which when we see the results of these current programs, we'll be announcing. But we intend to keep the market certainly well informed as the drilling progresses. And then once we get the assays and the results back from those, we'll systematically look at those, do our obviously validation on those results, and then announce them to the market. So we do expect to see a series of announcements both around the commencement and progress of the exploration programs and obviously the significant results as they come through.
Craig, we wish you the very best of luck. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Craig Moulton, the MD of Cobra Resources. As I say, Cobras, don't share your bed with them, but your pension fund, well, that might be a different issue. Shares, as I say, up from a penny to about 2.6 pence per share so far this year. That's all we got time for, I'm afraid, today. We'll be back very shortly on Share Talk with more such excellent investment opportunities. Until then, you have a very capital day.
Thank you for listening. Remember to visit our website for more news and other podcasts at www.share-talk.com.